Imagine finding out the love of your life is just using you for practice. When he found out the truth and confronted her, she just laughed in his face and said, "You really thought I'd marry you? You're nothing but practice for the real thing." He couldn't even respond, just stood there stunned. That was almost 13 months ago, 10 months to be exact. Last night, I saw her leaving the justice hall in handcuffs while her mom stood on the steps sobbing. The memory hit me while I was sipping mimosas straight with my girls at Sunday brunch. Lila had stepped away to the bathroom to fix her lip gloss, and that's when her phone lit up on the table. A text popped up from someone named Trevor, complete with the eggplant emoji. My stomach dropped. The problem was Lila already had a boyfriend. And not just any boyfriend, Daniel. Quite possibly the best man I'd ever met. The kind of guy who sends a "Did you make it home safe?" text and doesn't fall asleep until you reply. The kind of man who surprised all of us with pink peonies on Valentine's Day because he wanted to thank the women who made Lila so happy. Before she came back from the bathroom, I snatched her phone. The messages went back for months. Hotel meetups, selfies in mirrors, late night, can't wait to taste you again texts. By the time Lila returned, we'd already screenshot everything. But we acted cool, like nothing had happened. She was busy rambling about her upcoming holiday party, casually dropping the detail that Daniel couldn't make it because of some sudden work emergency. That's when it clicked. This girl was planning to bring Trevor. The very next day, we asked Daniel to meet us at this cozy little matcha spot in Havenbrook. He walked in wearing his usual hoodie, looking confused as hell about why we'd emergency summoned him. Watching his face fall as he scrolled through the screenshots broke me. This tall, golden retriever-hearted man, 6'1", started tearing up right there against a wall of succulents. He kept whispering, "But I was going to propose at Christmas," staring down at his untouched matcha. It wrecked me inside. I wanted to hunt Lila down and drag her across the floor. Here was a man who watched Love Island with us without a single complaint, who was secretly making Pinterest boards of their dream wedding, and she was treating him like nothing. That's when Naomi's whole demeanor shifted. I recognized that look. It was the same one she had when we helped her take down her toxic ex, pure schemer energy. "Daniel, honey, do you trust us?" she asked. He just nodded, too broken to even form words. "Good. Then block off next Saturday. We're about to serve justice." The days leading up to the party felt like our very own revenge movie montage. Claire whisked him off to her bougie barber in Eastmere, where they cleaned up his beard and gave him a fresh fade that made his eyes stand out like neon. The trim? Perfection. Suddenly, his jawline looked sculpted, and I couldn't stop thinking, damn, Lila really fumbled this? Sophie hauled him through Langford's, making him try on suits like we were styling him for the red carpet. We finally settled on a navy blue masterpiece that hugged his body in all the right places. The way it framed his shoulders? Honestly criminal. Meanwhile, I took charge of confidence training at my Pilates center, making him strut between reformers while I kept reminding him, "You're not a snack, you're the entire meal." The group chat was chaos, Pinterest boards filled with ideas, late-night voice notes at 3 a.m. Brainstorming strategy. Naomi even lined up the perfect date for him. A stunning marketing director with marathon legs that looked like they never ended. Someone guaranteed to make Lila shrivel in her heels. Saturday came and we gathered at Claire's loft like soldiers gearing up for war. Naomi's detail was handled. His skin moisturized, cologne applied on all the pulse points, Raphael Noir, the kind that makes you weak at the knees. Hairstyled but not overdone. Sophie even borrowed her dad's Marcelli timepieces for him. By the time we were finished, Daniel, who normally lived in sweatpants, looked like he belonged on a Central Plaza billboard. And it wasn't just his outfit. It was the new energy radiating from him. He wasn't our heartbroken friend anymore. He was a king. The inside updates started rolling in as soon as Lila arrived at her company party. She waltzed in with Trevor on her arm, trying to pass him off as Daniel. This average dude in a cheap, poorly fitted suit attempted to play the role, clueless about even the basics of Daniel's startup. Her boss looked thrilled to finally meet the man Lila had bragged about non-stop. And then it happened. The real Daniel walked in, his gorgeous new date by his side. The room fell silent. You could hear the tension crackle. Phones came out. Videos started spreading. Lila's face went from confused to shocked to completely destroyed. It was better than any reality show I'd ever watched. Her boss kept darting glances between the two men, like he was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. Trevor stood there awkwardly, not even realizing the storm he was in. But the highlight? Daniel didn't go low. He didn't need to. He glided through that room looking like money itself, charming everyone in sight, his stunning date glowing at his side. He was elegance, confidence, and revenge all rolled into one. His glow-up did all the talking while Lila's carefully built image went up in flames. The aftermath was even sweeter. Trevor vanished into the crowd, gone without a word. Lila tried to spin an explanation, but really, how do you tell your boss you brought your secret fling to the company holiday party? Her co-workers were eating it up, probably live-tweeting every second. Someone even said she locked herself in a bathroom stall, hyperventilating loud enough for everyone to hear, before storming out screaming, "You bitches ruined everything. You'll regret this." At the time I thought she was just being dramatic. But the next morning my phone was buzzing nonstop. 47 missed calls from Lila. Before I could wrap my head around it, there was pounding on my townhouse door so fierce it rattled the frame. I stumbled out of bed, still in yesterday's clothes, and peered through the peephole. Lila stood there, a wreck, mascara streaks down her cheeks, hair a mess, still in the wrinkled dress from the party. She was screaming my name, insisting she knew I was inside. I even saw my neighbor's door crack open across the hall. My hand shook as I typed into our group chat. Code red. Lila is at my door, and she looks ready to break it down. Naomi texted back instantly, telling me to start recording everything and to absolutely not respond to Lila. A second later Claire chimed in, saying building security was already on the way. The pounding on my door only got worse, and then I heard Lila start kicking it like she was trying to break it down. 2 guards finally showed up, and through the door I could hear them trying to get her to calm down. She was screaming about how we'd ruined her life, how her boss now thought she was some kind of whore. One of the guards cut her off and told her firmly that she needed to leave immediately, or they'd be calling the Metro Police Department. When they finally escorted her out, I just collapsed onto my couch, my hands still trembling so hard I could barely hold my phone. The adrenaline drained out of me in a rush, and for a second I thought I might actually puke. That's when Daniel texted, asking if I was safe. Apparently Lila had pulled the same stunt at his townhouse around 7 in the morning. 4 hours later, all of us were holed up in Claire's loft for an emergency meeting. Daniel showed us doorbell cam footage from his place. Lila wild-eyed screaming that she was going to destroy everything he cared about. Naomi was already snapping screenshots, saving everything as evidence. Sophie reminded us, voice shaky, that Lila knew where every single one of us worked. The room went dead quiet. Daniel looked like hell, admitting he hadn't slept a minute since the party. He was supposed to pitch to investors on Tuesday, but he couldn't even focus on his slides. Meanwhile, Isabel, the girl we set him up with, had been sweetly checking in on him, not even knowing the half of what was going on. Monday morning hit like a nightmare. I walked into the garage at my Pilates center and found my car keyed with the word, bitch, gouged deep across the hood. When I asked security for footage, they told me the cameras just happened to be down the night before. My boss caught sight of the damage and gently asked if I wanted to file a police report. Naomi was at her law firm when reception rang her office to say a woman named Lila Carter was in the lobby, accusing Naomi of stealing confidential documents. Security kept her from getting upstairs, but she still caused a whole scene in the marble lobby, shouting to anyone who'd listen that Naomi was some kind of corporate spy. Meanwhile, Sophie's Instagram was drowning in DMs from burner accounts, hurling every vile insult you could imagine. Some of them even included details about her parents' bistro in Riverton and threats to leave fake reviews everywhere. Sophie's hands shook as she screenshotted them all. By that evening, we were back at Claire's with the blinds drawn, ordering takeout none of us touched. Naomi ding from our phones made us jump. Daniel mentioned Lila still had a key to his townhouse he'd never gotten back, so Naomi started calling locksmiths while Sophie half-heartedly ordered pizza. None of us wanted to go home. Around midnight we were all still piled in Claire's living room, nerves frayed, eyes darting at every sound outside the window. Daniel sat on the couch, laptop open but not really seeing anything. Tuesday morning his big investor meeting was at 9. We made him swear to text afterward. He left early, dressed sharp in his best suit, trying to fake confidence, but I noticed his hands trembling around his coffee cup. 2 hours later, my phone lit up with a flood of texts from him. The meeting had blown up. Someone had sent his investors fake screenshots that twisted messages to make it look like he was abusive toward Lila. In the middle of the meeting, the lead investor called him out in front of the entire board, asking about reputation risk. Just like that, his whole startup was hanging by a thread, and they gave him 73 hours to prove the screenshots were fake. Not long after, Claire called me crying from her office bathroom. Her LinkedIn had been hacked that morning, and someone used it to message her CEO, accusing her of embezzling company money. IT cleared her within an hour, but HR still scheduled her for a formal meeting Thursday. She'd been there 7 years without a single issue, and now people were side-eyeing her in the hallways. I kept asking myself, how was Lila orchestrating all this so perfectly? Who thought of the Raphael Noir cologne? Who mapped out these exact attacks? It was too coordinated. That afternoon, Daniel dragged himself back to Claire's. He looked hollowed out. From his jacket he pulled a tiny velvet box and placed it on the coffee table like it burned to touch. Inside was the most flawless princess-cut diamond ring, exactly the one Lila had pinned on her secret wedding board. He couldn't return it. The band had M engraved on the inside. He just sat there staring at it in silence. Then his phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. It was Trevor Hayes, the side guy, sending him a connection request. Trevor claimed he had no clue who Daniel even was. Attached were screenshots of Lila telling him Daniel was just her roommate, that she was basically single. Trevor said she'd been acting unhinged with him too since the party. We gathered around Claire's kitchen island debating if Trevor was genuine or just another pawn. Naomi looked him up on LinkedIn. Turned out he worked at some insurance company in Northgate, just looked like a normal guy. Daniel didn't care. He just muttered that Trevor was nothing but another lie in Lila's collection. By Wednesday morning the storm hit me directly. My boss called me into her office looking uneasy. Our Pilates center had received a formal complaint with the Consumer Trust Council, accusing me of inappropriate conduct. On top of that, 3 brand new 1-star Yelp reviews had popped up overnight, accusing me of making unwanted advances during classes. My boss knew it was fake but still had to log everything for corporate. At the same time, Sophie texted us with something huge. While digging for ways to help clear Daniel's name with investors, she remembered that she'd set up Lila's work laptop last year, and still had access to the company's cloud backup. Turns out Lila had been using that laptop for all her personal emails, including every single one with Trevor. Naomi told us to save everything but not touch it yet, since it was a legal minefield. That night I couldn't sleep a wink. Naamiri car that passed through shadows across my wall that looked like someone watching. Naamiri creak in the building had my chest tightening. Around 3 a.m. my phone buzzed. Daniel had messaged the group chat from some hotel downtown. Around midnight, someone tried the handle on Daniel's townhouse door and jiggled the lock like they were testing it. The security cameras caught a figure in a hoodie, but the angle never showed a face. By Thursday morning, Claire was dragging herself into her HR meeting, trying to look composed even though she hadn't slept in days. They told her IT had traced the hack to an IP address that definitely wasn't hers, but then suggested she take a few days off. Sure, it was paid leave, but everyone in her department was already whispering, and after 7 spotless years, her reputation was suddenly cracked wide open. That same afternoon, Naomi's phone rang at her law firm. Building security was on the line. A false emergency threat email had been sent in with her name on it, and they had to evacuate all 47 floors immediately. The Federal Bureau of Inquiries and Bomb Squad arrived within 20 minutes, swarming the building and questioning everyone. At that point, it wasn't just harassment anymore. This had become a federal crime. By late afternoon, 2 Federal Bureau of Inquiries agents were sitting in Naomi's office, notebooks out, asking her for every detail. They wanted the full story about Lila, about the party, about everything that followed. Naomi laid out the receipts, screenshots, doorbell footage, Daniel's texts. When she mentioned Lila screaming at the party that we'd all regret this, the agents looked at each other like they'd heard it before. One of them even said these kinds of domestic disputes blowing up into threats were their bread and butter. That night, back at Claire's loft, Daniel broke down. He started throwing things in a bag, muttering that he was done. Maybe he should just move back to Fairhaven with his parents and vanish where Lila couldn't touch him. His phone buzzed mid-panic. Isabel checking in after hearing industry gossip about his investor disaster. By Friday morning, she offered to meet him for coffee, just as friends. She'd been through a stalker situation before, and wanted to share what she'd learned. He hesitated, but we pushed him. He needed someone outside our circle to talk to. They met in a cafe in Milford Docks, and she came through. She gave him the name of a security consultant and a lawyer who specialized in harassment, told him how her ex had pulled similar stunts, and that the only way forward was meticulous documentation and zero direct contact. That same afternoon, Sophie's mom called in tears. Lila had shown up at their family bistro in Riverton during the lunch rush, screaming about food poisoning and threatening to call the health department. Customers bailed, chaos erupted, and Sophie's mother, who already wasn't in great health, clutched her chest from the stress. Her dad had to close the bistro early and rush her to urgent care. By evening, the Federal Bureau of Inquiries went to Lila's townhouse, but her roommate said she hadn't been home in 2 days and had left with a suitcase. The agents left their card, and the roommate, terrified, immediately texted Lila to warn her, but also messaged Daniel because she was scared herself. She said Lila had been spiraling before she left, throwing things and screaming about how we'd all pay. We regrouped at Claire's again, living like we were under siege. Groceries delivered to the door, laptops open while we tried to work remotely, shifts to keep an eye on the security feeds. Naomi kept saying Lila would make a mistake soon, but every sound outside felt like a warning. Saturday morning, Trevor texted Daniel with screenshots of Lila threatening him too, for daring to talk to Daniel. One message said she knew where Trevor's daughter went to school. That pushed him straight to the police station, filing a report and getting a restraining order as fast as possible. Meanwhile, Sophie was digging deeper into the cloud backup from Lila's work laptop. She stumbled on emails between Lila and a therapist named Dr. Aldrin, sent 4 months earlier. Lila had been in therapy for adjustment disorder after some messy breakup with a guy named Jason. The therapist urged her to continue, but Lila ghosted after just 3 sessions. Sunday morning was another hammer blow. Daniel's business partner texted the group, panicked. Their lead investors had pulled out after all the online drama. $5 million gone overnight. The company only had maybe 7 weeks of runway left before collapse. 5 years of Daniel's blood, sweat, and dreams, slipping through his fingers while he just sat there staring blankly at his laptop. That same afternoon, my studio owner called me into her office with this heavy, sympathetic look, like she was about to put down a dog. She said she believed me, knew I wasn't at fault, but the complaints and threats had become too much. Corporate had forced her hand. Effective immediately, I was suspended. 5 years of building a client list, teaching 5 days a week, and I walked out with my belongings in a cardboard box like some cliché layoff scene from a movie. Naomi texted us not long after. Her law firm had told her to work from home for security reasons, but we all knew what it meant. Her review for senior associate was in 2 months, and instead of being on track, she was now radioactive. The partners were dodging her calls, and everybody pretended it was about keeping her safe. In reality, she was being quietly pushed to the edge. Monday morning, Isabel phoned Daniel just to check in, and I could hear her through the receiver offering to link him up with some investors she knew from her marketing job. She barely even knew him outside of that party, yet she kept repeating that nobody deserved what he was going through. And for the first time in days, I actually caught a faint smile on his face. That same morning, Claire got a call from work. Her boss told her she'd been completely cleared and they wanted her back by Wednesday. It felt like the first real piece of good news we'd had in ages. But when Claire logged into her first video meeting, her coworkers acted like she was made of fragile glass, as if she might crack or do something unpredictable at any moment. The gossip had already spread. She could see the chat lighting up while she was trying to give her presentation. Later that afternoon, I was slumped on the couch shoving chips into my mouth when Naomi called, practically screaming, telling me the Federal Bureau of Inquiries had just arrested Lila at Riverton International Airport. Lila had tried sneaking onto a flight to Bayview City with a ticket booked under her middle name, but they nailed her and hit her with charges for severe threats, cyberstalking, and interstate harassment. Within hours, her mugshot was plastered all over Twitter. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, hair a total mess. She looked absolutely destroyed. Her arraignment was scheduled for Wednesday, and one of the Federal Bureau of Inquiry's agents called Naomi to say they had dug through Lila's laptop and found everything. Receipts for paid smear campaigns, records of the fake reviews she ordered, even proof she hacked into our accounts. The wildest part? She had used her company credit card for some of it. That meant her employer instantly fired her, piling misuse of company funds on top of all the criminal charges. That night, Trevor rang Daniel and said he'd just been subpoenaed as a witness. He broke down and admitted Lila had been plotting for weeks before the party, telling him all about her plans to ruin us. And honestly, the fact that Sophie still had access to Lila's old work laptop backups a year later? That's one massive security failure that no one seemed to notice until now. Trevor showed Daniel texts from Lila where she raged about revenge and promised we'd pay for humiliating her. He kept apologizing over and over, swearing he never believed she'd actually follow through. By Tuesday, we all gathered at Claire's townhouse, sitting in exhausted silence, because even with Lila behind bars, the fallout was already unbearable. Daniel's startup was crumbling, I was jobless, Naomi's career had taken a hit, and Claire couldn't even look at her colleagues the same way. She finally said what we were all thinking. Sure, we'd won. But what kind of victory was it when everything around us still felt broken? Sophie's parents wanted to press separate charges for the chaos at their bistro. Her mom was still suffering panic attacks and sleepless nights. Their Yelp rating had plunged from 4.8 stars down to 3.2 because of the fake reviews. And though Yelp eventually scrubbed them, the damage was done. Customers weren't coming back, scared off by what they'd heard about the incident. Wednesday morning we walked into the downtown Justice Hall, and the place was jam-packed with people waiting on their hearings. Sophie's mom was shaking so hard her dad had to hold her steady as we all slid into seats at the back. When the bailiff called Lila's name, she strolled in wearing a dark navy suit, looking like she was about to interview for a desk job instead of answering for wrecking half our lives. Her parents sat front row, her mom quietly blotting her eyes with tissues while her dad sat frozen, staring straight ahead with a blank face. The judge read off the charges and it took nearly 5 full minutes. Harassment, severe threats, criminal mischief, plus a stack of other legal terms I barely understood. When asked for her plea, Lila stood up and whispered, "Not guilty," in a voice so small it didn't even sound like her anymore. Then her lawyer jumped in, spinning a story about her suffering emotional distress and temporary insanity after being betrayed by her closest friends. The prosecutor argued she should be held without bail, but her lawyer fought back, insisting she wasn't a flight risk and had strong community ties. Right there in the courtroom, her parents put up $50,000 bail. The judge ordered her fitted with an ankle monitor, banned her from leaving the state, and made it crystal clear: zero contact with us. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits, no social media. Absolutely nothing. Still, Lila sat there staring at us like she was memorizing our faces for some future score. After the hearing, Naomi recognized Lila's lawyer from a high-profile case last year. He'd gotten some spoiled rich kid off on an assault charge by convincing the jury it was a crime of passion. She explained he specialized in flipping guilty people into victims. Sure enough, he was outside talking to reporters, painting Lila as some heartbroken young woman destroyed by a cruel revenge plot, even hinting at a countersuit for emotional damages. By Thursday morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Someone had leaked the holiday party videos onto TikTok under the title, *cheating GF, gets exposed at work party. It had already racked up 3 million views. The comments shredded Lila, calling her every name you could imagine, but soon people started digging into our socials too. My Instagram blew up with messages until I locked it down. Claire's LinkedIn was flooded with fake connection requests, and Naomi's Twitter feed got swarmed with strangers blasting us as mean girls who went too far. Then, someone uncovered Lila's Pinterest account. She'd kept a wedding board titled *Future Mrs. Sullivan* that she'd been adding to for 2 years. Over 400 pins of dresses, flowers, venues, table setups. Strangers piled into the comments sections, half defending her, half calling her delusional. Poor Daniel had to watch his never-happened wedding plastered all over the internet. The hardest part was seeing pins she'd uploaded just days before the party. A custom cake topper shaped exactly like the two of them, and a luxury Silver Dunes venue she'd already contacted for quotes. Thursday night, Isabel showed up at Claire's loft with a couple of bags of Thai takeout and 2 bottles of wine. She didn't try to fix anything or promise that things would get better. She just sat with us, let us vent, and listened. At one point she opened up about her own past, how an ex had stalked her for 20 months after she ended things with him. She told us how she'd had to move twice, change her phone number 4 different times, and stayed away from dating for 3 whole years because she was too afraid. Then she looked at us and said, "Healing does happen, but never in the way you think. Changes you, makes you stronger, even if in the middle of it feels like you're breaking apart." By Friday afternoon my phone rang and it was my studio owner. She said 3 of my longtime clients had threatened to cancel their memberships unless I came back to teach, because they'd been taking my classes for years and didn't want anyone else. She offered me a few evening slots starting next week. Not my usual schedule, but I agreed instantly. I needed the paycheck, but more than that, I needed something normal again. That same night, Daniel's business partner called him about an angel investor who'd seen the whole story online. The guy's daughter had gone through something similar with a cheating ex, and he wanted to put money into Daniel's company to support people who'd been betrayed like that. The offer was enough to keep the startup alive for 9 months, but the investor wanted 35% equity in exchange, which was steep. Daniel only had 73 hours to decide if he should take it or keep searching for other funding. Then on Saturday, Sophie was tidying her townhouse when her phone buzzed with an Instagram message from a blank account. The message read, "This isn't over. You destroyed my life. I have nothing left to lose." Signed by someone calling themselves Marissa X21. Sophie knew right away it was Lila. She'd used that same "nothing left to lose" line before. She took screenshots and immediately sent them to the Federal Bureau of Inquiry's agent handling our case. Within 3 hours, they traced the IP address back to Lila's parents' house and issued an arrest warrant for breaking the no-contact order. The agent told us this was serious because it showed Lila had zero respect for the court. Sunday morning, Lila turned herself in, walking into court with her parents and her lawyer. This time the room was packed, buzzing with reporters and people following the case online. The judge looked furious. When the prosecutor presented the Instagram screenshots and the Federal Bureau of Inquiry's report, he yanked her bail on the spot, saying she'd already proven she couldn't follow orders. Lila's mom broke down sobbing while her dad practically carried her out of the courtroom. As guards cuffed Lila and walked her past us, she mouthed 2 words crystal clear for everyone watching. Fuck you. Sunday night, we gathered again at Claire's place, but nobody felt like celebrating. Naaman with Lila locked up, we were all cracked open from the damage she'd done. Daniel admitted his doctor had put him on antidepressants because the panic attacks weren't letting him sleep. Naomi finally confessed she'd been seeing a therapist twice a week, ever since the bistro incident. Sophie's parents begged her to move back home to Pacifica. They didn't believe New York was safe for her anymore. She was actually considering it, and that thought alone nearly broke me because it meant our tight circle of friends was splintering apart. I jumped every time my phone buzzed and double-checked my locks at night, even though I knew Lila was behind bars. Claire had gone so far as to install 3 extra deadbolts and a top-tier security system that probably cost more than my monthly rent. What had started as some twisted revenge scheme against Daniel had snowballed into something so much darker. And yeah, maybe we'd won in the legal sense, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss, like something had been stolen from each of us that we'd never get back, and the so-called win tasted like ashes in our mouths. Monday morning came too soon, and we found ourselves in a cold conference room at the Justice Hall, waiting for the prosecutor. She walked in carrying 3 boxes of files and spread out paperwork across the table like she was dealing cards. She explained the charges stacking against Lila. If she was convicted of everything, it meant at least 2 to 5 years in prison. Then she hit us with the bombshell. Lila's lawyer was already pushing for a plea deal, arguing she'd suffered a mental health breakdown triggered by being humiliated at the party. The prosecutor said the likely outcome might be counseling and probation, which made me sick to my stomach. That wasn't nearly enough for the destruction she'd caused. That whole afternoon, Naomi sat glued to her laptop digging into Lila's old therapist, a guy named Dr. Aldrin. She found his LinkedIn and read through his published papers, most of them focused on personality disorders and narcissistic traits. She couldn't access Lila's medical records, of course, but just seeing his field of work left us all wondering what Lila had really been treated for all those years. By Tuesday morning, Daniel called us from Isabel's office where they were combing through the investor paperwork. He decided to take the deal, even though it meant sacrificing 35% of his company. Isabel sat next to him, red pen in hand, striking out shady clauses and rewriting sections, so the investor couldn't take advantage of him later. Watching her work, it was obvious how protective she was, and honestly how differently Daniel acted around her compared to Lila. He actually looked calm for once. Meanwhile, Sophie's parents were still pushing for her to move back to Pacifica. Proof of how much this whole nightmare had shaken families far beyond just us. And I couldn't help wondering if the Federal Bureau of Inquiries tracked that Instagram message so fast, because they'd already been monitoring Lila's online activity in the background. Later that same afternoon, Daniel's phone rang. It was Trevor's ex-wife calling from Eastbridge. She said Lila had reached out to her a month ago, asking unsettling questions about Trevor's daughter. What school she went to, what her daily routine looked like. Trevor's ex-wife told us she'd kept all the texts and voicemails from Lila because the whole thing felt way too creepy. She said straight up she'd testify if we needed her, because to her this wasn't just drama, it was stalking, and she was terrified for her little girl's safety. Piece by piece, the evidence piled up, proving this wasn't a random meltdown. Lila had been scheming for weeks. By Wednesday morning, my phone lit up with alerts, and when I opened Twitter, my stomach dropped. Lila's parents had hired some high-end PR firm, and suddenly articles were everywhere, painting us as nothing more than mean girls who ruined someone's life over a so-called mistake. They even pulled photos off our Instagrams, smiling brunch pictures, turning us into caricatures of spoiled brats who had nothing better to do than destroy people. The online comments were vicious. Strangers called us every insult in the book and said we deserved whatever Lila threw at us. That same morning, the prosecutor called an emergency meeting. She warned us it was going to get ugly fast. Lila's team would dig through every detail of our lives, looking for anything to twist against us before the trial. Naomi's law firm called her later that day. They told her to take an extended leave until everything was over. She agreed, but it was written all over her face. She knew her career at that firm was basically finished. The next morning, Isabel stepped up and arranged a private self-defense class at a small gym in Harper's Point. The instructor, a woman who had survived stalking herself, immediately understood why we all kept glancing at the doors and mirrors. For an hour we threw punches, learned how to break out of grips, how to use our weight against someone. For once, doing something physical felt better than sitting in fear. But then Sophie just crumbled. She broke down sobbing halfway through, confessing she'd been having daily panic attacks and couldn't even eat at bistros anymore without feeling exposed. Her parents wanted her to quit her job and move back home to Riverton, and the worst part was she was seriously thinking about it. No matter how much we tried to comfort her, we could all feel it. This nightmare was splintering our group piece by piece. That Thursday afternoon, Daniel's startup officially announced the new funding. Most tech blogs cheered it on, but within hours Lila's defenders hijacked the posts, flooding his company's accounts with hate. The messages got so bad they had to hire someone just to delete threats and manage the harassment. At least the investor didn't back out. Friday morning, we were all at Claire's when Naomi's phone rang with a number none of us recognized. On the other end, Lila's lawyer. He served us with papers for a countersuit, claiming we'd intentionally inflicted emotional distress and conspired to ruin Lila's career. According to them, we'd plotted the holiday party setup to destroy her life, and now they wanted $500,000 in damages. The lawsuit was already filed, giving us 30 days to respond. That meant each of us had to hire our own lawyer on top of everything else. We sat in Naomi's kitchen that morning trying to figure out how to afford legal help. Naomi's own firm couldn't even represent her. It was a conflict of interest. Daniel kept running numbers on his phone, his face getting paler each second, realizing he might have to dip into his startup funds, which would gut his company. I barely had $300 in savings after rent, and Sophie's parents were seriously considering mortgaging their bistro to help cover costs. The thought made me sick. This was exactly what Lila wanted. The prosecutor called later and said the countersuit reeked of desperation, but admitted it complicated everything. Lila was angling for a settlement, Drop our charges if we dropped hers. Not long after, the Federal Bureau of Inquiry's agent on our case phoned, clearly frustrated. He told us domestic cases often turned into this kind of mess. Lila was playing the victim so well it made my skin crawl. That night, Isabel showed up at Daniel's townhouse with a check for 10 grand. When he tried to give it back, she slid it onto his coffee table and told him it was a loan. He'd do the same for her if the roles were reversed. For a moment they just stared at each other. Something shifted in the air. He finally accepted, and for the first time he hugged her. That weekend we all tried to act normal, but it didn't stick. Claire went on a date and kept checking her phone like she was bracing for bad news. I taught my Pilates classes, but I couldn't stop scanning every new face, wondering if someone had come to mess with me. Sophie helped out at her parents' bistro, but she jumped every time a plate crashed or someone raised their voice. Outwardly, we were functioning. Inside, we were shattered. Then Monday of week 5 came, and for once we actually got good news. The prosecutor told us Trevor's ex-wife had handed over emails from Lila. Emails where she explicitly wrote about wanting to psychologically destroy Daniel and the rest of us, weeks before the holiday party even happened. The timestamps made it undeniable. This was premeditated. Not long after, Lila's former roommate went to the police. Shaking with fear, she admitted she'd found a hit list taped to Lila's mirror months earlier. It had all our names, notes about our lives, our weaknesses. She'd taken photos before moving out because she was too scared to leave empty-handed. Hearing her describe it made me cold all over. The roommate also turned over Lila's journal, crammed with obsessive entries about Daniel, about us, about revenge. Some of the writing dated back to before she even started cheating on him. The prosecutor slapped on more charges, saying Lila was now looking at 6 to 12 years behind bars. Her lawyer immediately requested a psychiatric evaluation, signaling they'd try the insanity defense. The trial was set for 4 months out, which meant 3 more months of waiting, 3 more months of looking over our shoulders, 3 more months of trying to live with the shadow Lila had cast over all of us. Reading through the excerpts the prosecutor showed us made one thing crystal clear. This wasn't Lila snapping because she got embarrassed at a party. This was always who she really was under that perfect girlfriend mask. A few weeks later, Daniel and Isabel officially started dating. He was nervous about how people might judge him for moving on so soon, but Isabel just told him to hell with public opinion. When the two of them got photographed at dinner, the online comments were surprisingly supportive. One person even called it the upgrade of the century. And for the first time in weeks, Daniel actually laughed. By week 5, my studio reinstated me after investigators proved the fake reviews traced straight back to Lila's IP address. My clients even threw a little welcome back party for me, which meant more than I could put into words. My boss apologized for not standing by me from the start, admitting she should have known I'd never do what those reviews claimed. Piece by piece I was building my life back, one class at a time. 3 days later, we were back at the Justice Hall for another hearing. That's when I spotted Lila's parents walking toward us. They looked like they'd aged a decade in just a few weeks. Her mom's eyes were raw and swollen from crying, and her dad kept wringing his hands like he didn't know what else to do. They stopped right in front of us, and her mom broke down completely, sobbing harder. Her dad pulled out a checkbook, his hand trembling as he wrote. He said they'd cover everything, our damages, our lawyer fees, whatever it took. They kept repeating that Lila was sick, that she needed help, not prison. Her mom grabbed my arm, begging us to understand Lila wasn't herself. Then her dad locked eyes with me and said something that chilled me straight to the bone. Asterisk, you don't know what she's capable of if she feels cornered. Asterisk. The way he said it made me realize they'd been battling this side of Lila for years. Inside the meeting room, the prosecutor laid out plea deal options. The offer on the table was 20 months in prison, plus 6 years probation and mandatory psychiatric treatment. Lila's lawyer fought back, countering with 9 months in jail, counting time served. The prosecutor shook his head, said it wasn't even close to enough. They argued for nearly an hour, but neither side would budge. Finally, the prosecutor stood, saying, "Fine, we'll see you at trial." That night, Sophie called an emergency meeting at Claire's place. She sat twisting her hands, her face pale, and told us she was moving to Riverton the following week. The anxiety had become too much. She needed distance from everything. We hugged her and said we understood, but it felt like Lila was winning anyway. Sunday brunches now had an empty chair, and our group chat grew quieter by the day. The next morning, Naomi texted us that she'd gotten 3 job offers from firms following the case. They saw her as someone who'd handled herself professionally under insane pressure. She accepted a senior associate role at a bigger firm with better pay and benefits. At least one of us was starting to bounce back. She jumped in immediately, pouring herself into the work. 2 days later, the call came that rocked everything. Lila had tried to hurt herself in custody, hoarding her prescription meds until she had enough to took too many pills. I couldn't stop wondering how she'd even managed it. Don't jails watch meds carefully? Did she pretend to swallow them for days, maybe weeks, and stash them away? The guards found her unconscious and rushed her to the hospital. She survived, but barely critical condition for 12 hours. Her lawyer wasted no time, filing motions to dismiss all charges, claiming she was mentally incompetent. That afternoon, the prosecutor warned us that if the psych evaluation went in Lila's favor, she might walk free. The emergency hearing happened the next week. A psychiatrist testified Lila had borderline personality disorder with narcissistic traits and was in crisis. But the prosecution's expert countered that she still knew right from wrong at the time of her crimes. After 3 tense hours, the judge ruled she'd continue treatment but refused to dismiss the charges. Daniel took Lila's self-harm attempt the hardest. He came over that night and sat on my couch staring at nothing. He admitted he once loved her and didn't want her dead, just gone from our lives. Isabel held him, reminding him Lila's choices weren't his responsibility. She was steady for him in a way he desperately needed. The very next day, the media flipped the entire story. Now Lila was being painted as a fragile young woman destroyed by cruel friends. Think pieces flooded the internet about how society criminalizes mental illness. My Instagram filled with hate messages calling us monsters with no compassion. The prosecutor warned us that this would sway the jury. Lila was suddenly the victim again. By week 8, Claire was working full-time, throwing herself into every project she could find. Her CEO apologized for how the firm initially treated her and offered her a promotion, which she accepted, though she admitted to me in private that she was already interviewing elsewhere. Trust had been broken. Then came the gut punch. Lila was being released to a psychiatric facility while she waited for trial. Her parents posted a $200,000 bond to get her out. The facility was minimum security, visitors more freedom. The prosecutor was furious, warning us this would only make a jury sympathize with her even more. Our once solid case was unraveling piece by piece, and none of us knew what the verdict might look like anymore. 2 weeks later, we were called to the prosecutor's office downtown. She sat us at a massive conference table buried in folders and printouts. She laid out every piece of evidence she knew Lila's lawyer would weaponize. Our group chat messages from planning the party, the videos we uploaded, even texts where we laughed afterward. She tapped each paper, her voice sharp. They're going to make you the villains. You planned a public humiliation. You filmed it. You celebrated. You put it out there for millions of people to see, the prosecutor reminded us. That's what they'll say. You pushed her to this point. Then she drilled us for 3 straight hours, running through possible questions, making sure we stayed calm no matter how nasty things got. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay there picturing myself in the witness chair, Lila staring holes through me, her parents watching from the gallery, everyone silently judging us like we were the villains. At 3 a.m, Daniel texted me. He couldn't sleep either. He was having nightmares about the trial. Naomi buried herself in work, cranking out 14-hour days to avoid thinking about it. Claire started blowing through bottles of wine like water. I finally caved and called my old therapist, set up sessions again because even though Lila was behind bars, the damage she left behind was still chewing at us. By week 9, Isabel messaged the group chat suggesting we do something normal for once, see Hamilton and grab dinner. So we met at the theater, spent 3 hours watching the show, buying overpriced candy at intermission, pretending we were just regular 20-somethings in New York. At dinner afterward in some cozy Italian spot, nobody even mentioned Lila. We talked about dating apps, work drama, anything else. It was forced, but those few hours of fake normalcy mattered. Then Naomi's private investigator called with the bombshell. He dug into Lila's past and found another victim. A guy named Jason from her college days. Same story. She cheated, he found out, tried to leave, and she went ballistic. Harassment, threats, showing up at his dorm at all hours, spreading lies that he was abusive when he tried to get help. The poor kid never pressed charges. He just transferred across the country to escape her. Finally, we had pattern evidence. When we showed the prosecutor, she practically jumped out of her chair. She tracked Jason down, and after a week of back and forth, he agreed to testify. He told her it nearly ruined his life, that 6 years later he was still in therapy. His story proved Lila's behavior wasn't some one-off meltdown, it was a pattern. This changes everything, the prosecutor kept repeating as she read through his statement. Week 10 rolled around and we were back in court for pretrial motions. Lila's lawyer fought like hell to keep Jason's testimony out, calling it irrelevant and prejudicial. After 2 long hours of arguments, the judge ruled Jason could testify, but only about the facts, not his feelings. Lila sat at the defense table, looking medicated but focused, and when the judge gave his ruling, she turned and smiled at us. That smile made my skin crawl. Jury selection started Monday and dragged for 4 days. Her team tried to stack the panel with young women who might sympathize with a girl in crisis. The prosecution wanted older jurors who valued accountability. They asked everything: social media use, thoughts on mental illness, whether they'd ever cheated or been cheated on. Anyone who admitted to watching the party videos got dismissed. Finally, they seated 12 people who somehow hadn't heard the case. Day 2 of the trial came fast. Lila's lawyer opened, painting her as a bright woman whose untreated illness spiraled after we cruelly humiliated her at the party. He called our actions calculated and cold. Then the prosecutor stood up and laid everything out step by step: the planning, the escalation, the Jason pattern. She showed the jury how every move Lila made was deliberate. The jurors scribbled notes, faces unreadable. We spent 2 days on the stand, and Lila's lawyer came at us swinging. He dragged up every text from planning the party, the viral video Naomi posted, the chat messages where we joked about Lila's meltdown. But we stuck to what the prosecutor drilled into us: calm, factual, focused on what Lila did after. On day 3, Jason testified. Gasps echoed through the gallery when he described what she'd put him through. Lila started crying, but it looked like theater, crocodile tears for the jury. After closing arguments, the jury went to deliberate. We sat in the Justice Hall cafeteria for 8 hours, too sick to eat. My hands shook so bad I couldn't keep my coffee steady. Finally, the bailiff called us back in. The foreman stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all the major charges. Lila's mother let out a gut-wrenching wail, while her father glared at us with pure hatred. Lila just nodded like she'd expected it, no shock in her eyes. The judge banged his gavel, talking through sentencing procedures as her lawyer leaned over and whispered in her ear. We'd have to come back in 3 weeks for the actual sentencing. Until then, the judge ordered Lila held at the psychiatric facility. No bail. The prosecutor stood and said she'd be recommending 4 to 6 years based on the conviction. My body felt hollow, like all my insides had been scooped out. We filed out of the courtroom silently, the elevator ride down heavy with things none of us could say. 2 dragging weeks later, we were back. Sentencing day. We sat in the same seats we'd claimed since the start. The judge handed down 28 months in a minimum security facility with psychiatric treatment, plus 5 years of probation. Lila was barred from coming within 800 feet of us or contacting us in any way. Her mom sobbed so loud the bailiff had to hush her. Lila stood and gave an apology, but her voice was flat, like she was reading off a grocery list. Outside the Justice Hall, Daniel and Isabel held hands. Naomi was already scrolling through her work emails. Claire called for an Uber, and Sophie had taken the train all the way from Riverton just to stand with us. We hugged outside the Justice Hall and swore we'd keep in touch. But the truth was, something between us had shifted for good. The whole ordeal had tied us together, but it had also cracked us in ways we couldn't ever really fix. A week later, our lawyer called to let us know Lila's parents had dropped the civil suit. They couldn't afford to keep both an appeal team and a civil team. Technically, we could have countersued, but none of us had the energy anymore. We were just drained. The legal bills still stung, but at least they weren't unbearable now. About 5 weeks after everything finally ended, we got together for brunch at our old spot in Havenbrook. Sophie came in from Riverton, riding the subway for an hour just to be there. Sitting at that table again, I couldn't help but think about Jason's story from college. How he'd gone through the same exact pattern with Lila. The harassment, the lies, the stalking, even being forced to transfer schools just to get away. She'd always been like this. The conversation was different this time. No talk about dating gossip or weekend plans. Instead, it was therapy sessions, coping strategies, and how we were all trying to heal. We were different people, sitting at the same table we used to own every Saturday. Daniel's startup was thriving, thanks to the investor he'd picked up in the middle of all the chaos. He made Isabel his chief marketing officer, and she'd more than earned it. Far beyond just being his girlfriend. He admitted he was in therapy himself, still working through everything that happened. The engagement ring he'd bought for Lila was still shoved in his sock drawer, too painful to sell. Naomi landed partner track at her new firm, boosted by all the publicity the trial brought her way. Claire jumped ship to her company's biggest competitor, scoring a VP role and a massive signing bonus. I finally opened my own Pilates center in Cedar Heights after qualifying for a small business loan. Sophie took over running her parents' bistro and added a modern cocktail menu that had people lining up outside. 3 months after the trial, I got a news alert. Lila's appeal was denied. She'd serve her full 28 months with no chance of early release. I stared at the notification for a few seconds, then deleted it without a second thought. Some chapters just need to be closed and never reopened. Not long after, Daniel proposed to Isabel on the Havenbrook Bridge with a new ring he'd picked out himself. We were all there, hiding among tourists, trying not to cry as he dropped to one knee. This time the happiness was clean. No shadows from the past. Their proposal video went viral on TikTok, but for all the right reasons. 6 months after the trial, we gathered for Claire's birthday at a noisy Italian trattoria in the South Vale. Naomi was in the middle of telling us about a disastrous date where the guy actually brought his mom, when a woman at the next table turned around. For half a second from behind she looked exactly like Lila. Naomi, one of us froze like the world had hit pause. Then Sophie raised her glass and said, "Screw it. Who cares?" We all toasted to survival. We were scarred but not broken. Different but still ourselves. The city finally felt like home again. Man, this one was a ride. I love diving into all the twists and rabbit holes with you. Can't wait to do it again soon. Don't forget to like the video. It helps more than you know.
That was my story. What do you think about it? Would you have acted the same way or chosen differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the Keeping Secrets channel for more stories like this. Oh, and one more thing. This story is our little secret, so shh.